It's been a long time since I last published a video. During my time from not posting, I've been moving back home and it took a full year to get sorted to post any content. Originally I was going to return in September 2019, but now is better than never, I suppose. Anyway, today's video is a documentary describing the timeline and ownership of Twin Galaxies. I've been researching for a few months now, but before I post any other videos, I have to give a special thanks to Apollo Legend for hearing me out, especially regarding his past sources, as even he is interested in the history of who owned Twin Galaxies, as well as who ran the actual website and verified scores. Just think about it for a moment. Twin Galaxies allowed refs to verify scores, and some owners encouraged and verified scores when they weren't supposed to. To folks that want video game history integrity, like our viewers, this is valuable to us. But how do we tell what era of ownership of whose record may or may not be bogus? It took a while, but I compiled the timeline that I believe is accurate, along with articles and witness accounts. I even went back to archive.org and I pulled every TG logo, studied the web code, and took personal notes. Let's get started from the beginning. Back in 1981, when Walter Day was 32 years old, he purchased the Twin Galaxies arcade in Ottawa, Iowa, after being depressed with his previous career choices. Going into 1982, the magazine Time made an issue covering video games, which made him have the idea to create the scoreboard database we use today. The following summer of 1982, a few gamer magazines were issued with high score data taken from Twin Galaxies Arcade and Walter. After Walter's epiphany with the idea of a database in the community Walter had stirred up, he was bombarded with gamers wanting to give him scores for such a fantastic database that would mean a lot for many in the future of today. The summer of 1983, Twin Galaxies established the United States National Video Game Team that was put together by Walter himself and became the official supplier of video game Guinness World Records. This is also the year that Billy Mitchell, at the age of 18, reached out to Walter Day asking about the record of DK and Pac-Man. Billy Mitchell and others were invited out to an event called Electronic Circus with Jim Riley. Unfortunately, 1983 was the same year of what most call Atari Shock, aka the Great Video Game Recession, which lasted until around 1986, when things started to recover. During that recession, nearly 1,500 arcades were shut down. During 1984, Twin Galaxies, not just as an arcade, but as a potential future industry in gaming, suffered. It was until Walter pushed his team in 1987 under the Twin Galaxies name to tour the world, defeating gamers across the world in Europe. After big international news like that, Twin Galaxies and Walter Day was put back into the spotlight where they belonged. The news, however, wasn't enough, as in 1988, Guinness didn't publish Twin Galaxies video game records, most likely due to the aftermath of the recession. A decade later, in 1998, with the effects of the video game recession nearly gone, Walter Day wrote his own record book called the Twin Galaxies Official Video Game and Pinball Book of World Records, in response to Guinness no longer documenting video games. Walter used this book to encourage gamers to come to Twin Galaxies and make their own history. It wasn't until 1999 to early 2000 that the idea of speedrunning video games came about, where most would go for the high score. It was at this point in time when gamers found their place as either a speedrunner or a gamer wanting high score. In 2004, Walter Day met with Guinness World Records science and technology editor Dave Hogshead, who would later join Twin Galaxies as a head custodian of sorts down the road, again hoping that Guinness would go back to writing video game records. Unfortunately, this didn't happen, which prompted Walter Day to publish a second edition of his book with new scores included in 2007. It wasn't until the following year of 2008 that the writers over at Guinness would be inspired by Walter Day to create the Gamers edition of the Guinness World Records. However, this is when Walter Day's legacy spirals, with ownership changing to 8 individuals besides himself. This is what I consider the end of Walter Day's era. We'll get to them all in chronological order, but the second owner of Twin Galaxies was in fact Billy Mitchell as a co-owner with Walter Day. Sometime in March 2009, Walter and Billy gave a contract to Pete Bouvier in which all the Twin Galaxies website data was changed to match where Pete lived. Billy's name was confirmed to be on this paperwork. However, no one knows the full details of this agreement or how long it lasted. Pete Bouvier never revealed the agreement, nor did he have an idea of what to do with the video game business. When I made this timeline, I ended up deducing that it takes an estimated 2-year agreement to pay a certain unspecified amount, and if Pete Bouvier didn't pay by then, ownership would revert back to Walter and Billy. It was sometime in 2010 that Walter Day announced that he was leaving the video game industry behind, along with Twin Galaxies. With Pete Bouvier as the temp owner of Twin Galaxies with full control of the website, his ownership was cut short, along with his life. Bouvier was dying. During the time, Bouvier had 17 or more employed with Twin Galaxies who were volunteers, all of which were trying to get him to sign another contract to get out of ownership. Out of these 17 Twin Galaxy staff members, some were not given any pay from Bouvier, and I'll cover one of them shortly. But around March 2011, the Twin Galaxies website was parked, and this was pretty much the end of the Pete Bouvier era, which was quite bleak. In early 2012, Twin Galaxies introduced the new 4th and 5th owners, Jordan Adler, the owner of the 1UP, and Richie Knuckles, the king of arcades, both buying Twin Galaxies from Pete Bouvier while he was the temporary owner of TG. It's unknown if Bouvier, Mitchell, or Walter were paid for the ownership transfer. Richie, however, did have full control of the website with Jordan as the backbone. At this point in time is where my good pal Frico was able to educate me on this era, as he was a part of the team rebuilding and correcting the scoreboard's database. Frico worked along with Richie Knuckles and Eric Beluzik, an engineer of Web Insignia, which I'll get to in a moment, to rebuild their database from scratch with the website, while at the same time, the only adjudicating referees were Dave Nelson and Steve Boyer. However, there are staff who spoke up about Richie Knuckles verifying scores when technically he wasn't allowed to do so. Richie Knuckles then contracted a web development company called Web Insignia, in which they designed the new code and visual layout to the website. There were problems, however, as a fellow staff by the name of Patrick Scott Patterson, one of the 17 I mentioned earlier, who has recently been found mishandling Twin Galaxies property and even possible unsubmitted records that are now damaged and forever lost. This gentleman was trying to tell Eric, Steve, and Web Insignia what to do with the website and many other actions. This is when Frico told me he stepped in and stopped him from interfering with the rebuilding process. I may cover this in a future video. Everything was going great though, for both Richie and Jordan until Kong Off 2 in November 2012. At Kong Off 2, Jordan and Richie got into a fight. It's unknown if it turned physical or if it was just verbal, but regardless, their friendship was pretty much over, along with the desire to run Twin Galaxies. This only further got worse when Web Insignia finally finished the web code and gave the two of them the bill. We don't know the amount Web Insignia wanted, but it was more than what they paid for Twin Galaxies as a whole. This was the end of the Adler and Knuckles era. March 2013, there were yet again new owners of Twin Galaxies. As you see, Web Insignia took full control and possession of Twin Galaxies for lack of payment on their work, introducing the new 6th and 7th owners of Twin Galaxies, Steve Jones, CEO of Web Insignia, and Eric Beluzik, Web Insignia's Engineer Chief Technical Officer and now owner of Twin Galaxies. It's really unknown what happened during their time period. They really only owned Twin Galaxies for a year, and at some point they used the remaining skeleton code of Twin Galaxies to start a website called thegamerlife365.com, which some people say was a failed clone of TG. I later found out GamerLife365 was registered by Patrick Scott Patterson, who was the only one not paid by Pete Bouvier for his volunteer work. I guess this angered PSP, leading him to trying to take TG as a whole, or at the very least its community, as archive.org lists GamerLife365 as a redirect to Patrick's website. I'm not sure why or what connections Patrick had with Web Insignia, but it was really sketchy to say the least when I found this. It wasn't until December of 2013 that Billy Mitchell tried to buy TG back for Walter Day from Web Insignia CEO Steve Jones, who had full control of the website and its code. Not sure of the contract or what happened, Billy Mitchell either outright bought it from Steve Jones or legally imposed on him for his fraction of TG. It wasn't until about March 2014 that Eric had also had his ownership transferred to Billy and Walter. It's unknown how that agreement even went. However, it was on March 2014 that Jace Hall, our current 8th owner of Twin Galaxies, has purchased all of Twin Galaxies from Walter with a payment of $70,000. Some say Walter immediately fled to India. Not really sure what happened, but don't forget guys, this was his career. A measly $70,000 for years of dedication. I don't know if it was worth it. I've been working with Apollo Legend in his Discord server, and I'm hard at work in my free time researching both scores and the history of TG. I do this for the video game integrity and history. I don't get ad revenue or money for doing this. Hopefully someone will use this information here to make something. I really wanted to physically show what era was the most corrupt. I'm unsure. Tell me what you think down below. See you and have a good day.